Look at that hair, man. All right, we're live, guys. We're live. So we're just waiting for Ken.
Awaiting our guest.
Yeah, he'll be right here. And with no
How's it going, Ken?
Hey guys, how we doing?
Hey,
we're live. So tell us what you've been up to lately. Tell us about your book and what you have planned. That should take a few minutes.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on. It's absolutely an honor and a pleasure to be here with you on your show. Yeah, the past, since the pandemic started, I've basically just been working on a new book, and it's finally about to drop. It's called The Essential Guide to the Loch Ness Monster and Other Aquatic Cryptids. So that's kind of my main project that I'm working on right now, just getting that released and promoted and so forth. So hopefully it'll be out in a few weeks here. And yeah, other than that, you know, I've got hopefully some events coming up this year, including yours. So that's exciting. Last year, we didn't have much of that. And also we're doing an expedition in July. We're traveling with a group out to Northern California, and we're going to search for evidence of giant cryptid salamanders that have been reported there for decades, like the size of the giant Chinese and Japanese salamanders, you know, 4 to 5 feet long. So, and it's kind of tied into Bigfoot lore. A lot of the older Bigfoot books would have passing mentions of these giant salamander sightings. And we're going to be camping right next to the Patterson-Gimlin film site. So it all kind of happens in that same area. So that'll be in July. So I'm excited about that as well.
You're going to be busy in July.
Sorry?
How did that come about? I saw you, I think the first mention of the giant salamander project I saw mentioned by Lauren Coleman. Was that something put on by him, or who started this, the giant salamander search in North California?
Well, it's always been on my bucket list ever since I learned about it. I love salamanders. I collected them when I was a kid, and amphibians in general are one of my favorite families of animals. But what happened was I was on and by the way, Lauren Coleman was also a huge influence as far as this mystery goes, because he wrote about it in his book about Tom Slick, which is a really, really great book on the...
I have the book, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. So you mentioned there's a good section there. Tom Slick obviously mounted an expedition, not only to search for the Yeti and Bigfoot and the Lake Iliamna monster, but also for these giant salamanders. So anyways, I was on with some guys from the Bluff Creek Project, who are the guys that go out to the Patterson-Gimlin film site once a year, and they set up a bunch of trail cams and stuff, and they found the original spot. And one of the guys is named Jamie Wayne, and he was posting about the giant salamanders, and he and I just started talking. And he said, I know all the spots where these things were seen back in the day. I found them. So so he and I started putting ideas together, and then Lauren Coleman found out about it, and he was very excited and wanted to be a co-sponsor along with his International Cryptozoology Museum. So my team consists of a couple of biologists from here in Texas and Oklahoma that are experienced with salamanders, and Jamie Wayne is going to be our guide there, and I think he knows some people that work in the wildlife department and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how it's all come together. But it's I think if nothing else, it illustrates that there is more to the field of cryptozoology than many people realize. People obviously think of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and Dogman and chupacabras and all those strange creatures, but there are other lesser known cryptids like these giant salamanders that people aren't real familiar with, but there is evidence, at least in terms of eyewitness accounts, that these things might actually exist.
Well, certainly, like Jamie Wayne, I mean, he's obviously involved in the Bluff Creek project itself, but he's a geologist, he's a scientist, a legitimate scientist, and interested in the giant salamander. So there must be some credence to that. I would imagine for him to try to pursue this himself. I mean, he's not just somebody. He is just somebody. But
he's
obviously,
he's
a scientist, legitimately. I mean, by trade, a geologist at least. He went to college. He has a degree, and it's an interesting pursuit for sure. We have salamanders here. I mean, small ones. I've heard the stories and lore about the giant salamanders in that area, and it's fascinated me also. It's certainly interesting.
It's a great mystery, and there are a lot of Native American. This is another thing, because Jamie's in that area, and other guys in the Bluff Creek project like Stephen Stuford, they speak to a lot of the native people, the Hoopa Nation, and some of those other tribes have long traditions about these giant salamanders. So it's not just the few sightings that are on record in cryptozoology books, but there apparently have been other accounts of these giant salamanders that that have kind of flown under the radar. So,
well, certainly, the Bigfoot thing itself. I mean, it's a long history with the Native Americans there, with Bigfoot itself and the salamanders and all that. It's gone on a long time. It's a certain interesting, and I agree, certainly worth the pursuit. What you're doing, I wish I could be on that expedition. It sounds completely interesting to me.
How long are you going for, Ken? How many days is that?
Well, we're unfortunately only be able to be up there for a few days, because the two biologists that I'm bringing along, they couldn't get a lot of time off of work, and we're driving up there, so it's like a 30-hour drive each way. So that'll take a day or two on each end. So we'll be up there like the second week of July, basically. And and we're going to try some things, obviously with the advancement of things like eDNA. So if we can take some water samples in some of these lakes where these salamanders have been reported, we're hoping to find a lab that can do an eDNA analysis similar to the one they did at Loch Ness in 2019. But we've got some other high-tech gadgets that we're going to try out, and different techniques, kind of modern approaches to trying to find evidence. So it's exciting.
So you're going to be looking for a giant salamander at the same time paying attention for Bigfoot. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I've never been to the Patterson-Gimlin site, so it's like Mecca for Bigfoot researchers. So that'll be exciting, even if I just get to go there for a few minutes, So
it's an exciting area, period. I mean, they just had the recent discovery of the Humboldt marten, a rediscovery of the thought to be extinct species of marten in that area. Yeah. And they caught on trail. The Bluff Creek project caught that on camera in that area and rediscovered it. I guess we can give credit to them, I suppose.
Yeah.
At this point, for the rediscovery of that species.
Yeah.
So
no
it's
doubt.
kind of cool. And Jamie Wayne is involved in that project also. And has some inclination, I guess, that there might be the giant salamander also. It's an interesting pursuit, regardless. I hope it does exist. I would love to see it another new discovery there in the Bluff Creek area. That would be just wonderful. That'd be amazing.
It
Now-
would be
really
really cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Now, if this giant salamander does exist,
Mhm.
I mean, wouldn't you think it would have to be hundreds and hundreds of years old and probably spend most of its time in hibernation state to not be seen and known, and maybe only come out and just feast?
Well, I think there is evidence of like giant salamanders existing previously. The problem is now is proving that something still exists today. I think that's the issue. I think there were giant salamanders existing in other areas of the world.
Yeah, well, there are also fossils of giant salamanders in North America, and the habitat is very similar to Japan and China. But you bring up a good point. If these things exist, they're probably critically endangered at this point, so there probably aren't too many left. But salamanders, they're first of all, they're very good at camouflaging. At least the aquatic species. We used to have some Japanese giant salamanders at the San Antonio Zoo, where I'm a volunteer, and the things they basically look like rocks. I mean, they don't move; they just kind of sit on the bottom, and their skin is kind of this mottled gray thing. And so people would walk by the tank, and they wouldn't even see them, and they're like, "Where are they?" They're those rock-looking things. So, and also the aquatic salamanders that we think these might be that those particular species live in kind of holes in cold water, fast-moving rivers and streams. So it's water where there's a lot of water movement. So it's not easy to probably look in there. And they're also, again, they like during the day in particular, they kind of hide in little holes and caves under the water. So they're good at staying hidden. So that's probably my best guess is, they're probably very rare if they exist at this point. And they're also just, very hard to find because of the habitats that they live in.
So is that what you're expecting, an aquatic version of a salamander and not a woodland version?
Yeah, correct. The old sightings, they go back to the 1920s and a guy named Frank Griffith. And then there was a biologist in the 30s that claimed he saw them. And then an animal collector in the 50s. All of these were supposedly sighted under the water. So they were looking down into the water and they saw the shapes of these giant salamanders kind of sitting on the bottom. So that's what we're expecting.
Wow, that's really interesting. So what's the most recent sighting or supposedly claim of sighting?
Well, Jamie Wayne just posted, we have a private group where we're discussing things, and he just posted recently that he met a guy that has a recent account, but I haven't gotten any information beyond that. That was just a few days ago. So I can't honestly say the most credible recent sighting because I'm not in that area. There's also a Bigfoot researcher you guys have probably heard of named M.K. Davis that does a lot of the film analysis and stuff. He's down in Mississippi, and he was out of Bluff Creek years ago, and he claimed he had a sighting of one of these giant salamanders in that area. And I write about this in one of my books, but at the time he didn't evidently put two and two together that what he was looking at was an unknown. So yeah, there have been some recent sightings, but I don't have really good information, unfortunately, on those right now. Hopefully I'll have more information as we get closer to the expedition.
Well, it's a fascinating experience just to be able to go on an expedition like that. I'm sure it will be. It's something you're going to remember the rest of your life. I wish I could be there. It sounds like a lot of fun. Just searching for new species. I guess that's really cryptozoology, really in a nutshell, is searching for new species.
That's it.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're doing a great job. You have, you've been fortunate enough to be on, I don't know how many now different movies or television series and things like cryptozoology and your own books, several books now. You're a fascinating person. You get to travel. The Missing Alaska series. What a great opportunity for you. What a great deal. That was really cool stuff there. I have to hand it to you. I love the series. I loved it. I was jealous. I was seriously jealous of what you were doing there. That was really cool stuff. Congratulations. What a good job you did in what you did there.
His July, he's booked, man. He gets done with that, and then he's coming to Michigan.
That's right. Yeah.
He can come and report on the expedition.
So many different things. You had the real Wolfman and Search Monsters, Terror in the Skies, Monitored Monster, all these cool things on television, and your awesome books also. The Essential Guide to Bigfoot. I have that right here. I have a couple copies from you, if you remember. They got like the early copies, the signed and number stuff.
First printing, yeah.
Yeah, I just got your new book too. I haven't received them yet. I'm waiting to get those books in the mail. On your new book here, I'm sure it's going to be good too. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to getting in the mail and reading. I bought 2 copies of that also.
Yes, thank you.
In case you can't tell, Ken, you have a fan.
No, I appreciate your work. I appreciate your research that you do and the time you put into the subjects that you're researching, and it's really cool. Even the Salamander project, that's just way cool to me. I just love it. I love that stuff.
Thank you. Really cool. I'm honored, and I appreciate your support. I feel very blessed to be able to do some of these things, and it wouldn't be possible if I didn't have, supporters and friends that buy my books and give me opportunities to do lectures and things. So, I really appreciate it.
Interesting subject. You're presenting interesting things to the people out there wanting to, have that interesting subject presented to them. You're doing a great job at doing exactly that. And obviously, I mean, you've been on a number of now TV shows and written numerous books. I mean, on cryptozoology. It's a great thing you're doing. I mean, for people like me, you're my hero. I'd love to be doing what you're doing. It's a really cool thing.
Thank you. Like I said, I feel honored.
Dude. I love what you're doing. The cool stuff.
You didn't know you were going to become Superman, did you, Ken?
I'm blushing a little bit, but
no, I've got lots of heroes in my world, the Bigfoot world, I guess. I'm more of just a Bigfoot guy, and I've got my heroes. But your book right here, your heroes that you put in the beginning of this book right here are pretty much the same heroes I have also. Same friends and heroes. You mentioned friends and heroes. I pretty much have a very close list of what you list in your Essential Guide to Bigfoot book.
Very cool. Well, and as I also mentioned in the book, I mean, my heroes are anyone that goes out and spends time and effort searching for Bigfoot or other cryptids. And, I could only list so many names in the beginning, but there are hundreds of unsung heroes in the field, people whose names are not well known, but they go out and put a lot of work and effort into trying to find evidence. And I've been fortunate to be in contact with many of them. But, those are my heroes because they don't get the recognition they deserve, but they're definitely putting the time and the work in.
Well, there are lots of unsung heroes in the field for sure. I agree with that. But then we have guys like you that are pushing, everything forward. You're able to do so using the platform you have, and able to push things forward and generate more interest in the subjects that you're, dealing with. I'm more of a Bigfoot guy. You're a cryptozoologist, including Bigfoot. But you're creating interest in the subjects that you write on, that you go on TV shows, exploring, and the expeditions you go on. You're pushing things forward. you're the unsung heroes, in my opinion, not us.
Creating new
Thank you.
researchers.
Thank you, Ken.
Well,
Creating new researchers, Ken.
well, thank you. Well, it's it's a chain of responsibility that goes back to some of the guys that Ernest was talking about. I mean, the pioneers in the field, and then I'm part of maybe the third generation or fourth generation, and then there's other guys coming up. So I think a lot of longtime Bigfoot researchers, particularly towards the ends of their careers, guys like Rene DeHinden and John Green, Peter Byrne, and Bob Titmus, probably realized that this was not a mystery they were going to solve or that was going to be solved in their lifetime. So they were kind of tutoring the next generation of Bigfoot researchers to take over to take hold of the mantle and continue on. And to that end, I mean, I'm honored to inspire people, but one of the things that really gets me excited, guys, is when I meet young people and I have opportunities to do lectures at the zoo and different schools and libraries. And when I meet, the kids that are really into this stuff, that I see myself in them, that they're like, they know their stuff. They're young, but they've read all these books and they're super curious, and that gets me excited. And also I sometimes get emails from like high school students and college students that are wanting to get involved and how do I become a cryptozoologist, so that excites me too, that there's hope, that we've got a lot of young people that are going to be coming into the field if we don't solve this Bigfoot mystery, for example, ourselves. And I'm sure all of us here would love to see that solved in our lifetime.
So speaking of all these people you're inspiring, that you enjoy inspiring, I suppose you could say, what inspired you? What started you off in this whole field of cryptozoology and or Bigfoot itself that led you in the direction that you ended up at this point today?
Well, certainly I get asked that question a lot because it's not a conventional lifestyle or career path. I never planned to do this with my life. I've just been very lucky. But what I tell people is when I was a kid, about 8 or 9 years old, I already had a fascination with creatures, and I talked about, I like to collect salamanders and snakes, and my first pet was a small alligator called a caiman. So I had all these exotic creatures. And then I loved monster movies too, like Godzilla movies and stuff when I was a kid. And so when I found about Bigfoot and cryptozoology, it kind of was a synthesis of all those different ideas, monsters, creatures, mystery. And so I just, from a young age, 8 or 9 years old, I read every book on Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and all these different mystery animals. But as I was growing up, my family traveled a lot, and I was very fortunate because my mother was a travel agent and she got discounts. So we traveled all around the world, and wherever I went with her in our worldwide travels, I would always try to learn about the different legends of creatures and things in different cultures. And then when I was 15 years old, my family vacationed at Loch Ness in Scotland. And of course, that was a dream come true. And so at 15 years old, I sort of tried my first field research. I had a movie camera, 8mm, and I was interviewing people in the different towns and asking them if they'd seen the monster. So I really started trying to do this at a very young age. And then, again, I never planned to do it as a career, but as I got older, I just got some lucky breaks, and one thing led to another, and started writing books. I met Lauren Coleman and some other heroes, and they inspired me. Started writing books, got lucky and got on some TV shows, and so it's just kind of taken off from there. So I didn't plan it, but it's been fun.
Did it start with Nessie in Scotland?
I mean, that was my first real attempt at a field trip, I think. And around that same time period, my family also vacationed in Switzerland. And I remember trekking through the Alps, the Alp Mountains, and I was looking for something called the Tatzelworm, which is the spring worm, which is an old cryptid that's said to live in the Alps Mountains, kind of like a weird legless lizard, kind of like the Mongolian death worm. Do what?
What do you think? Does it exist?
I mean, there aren't any modern sightings. At one time in the 19th century, it was considered to be a real animal, and it was actually featured in different hunting guides and stuff in Bavaria. And then I think the last credible sighting was in the 1920s. So it's been about a century, and no one that I know of has ever reported seeing a Tatzelwurm since that time. So if they existed, maybe they went extinct. Who knows?
You know, the surprising thing in nature is like species go extinct quite often, you know, and or maybe not completely go extinct, or at least change to a different type of species that we would, you know, you have evolution going on. But that's something that continuously happens, is extinction of species, you know, and that's an ongoing process. You know, some people claim, you know, that, you know, maybe the global change in temperature and weather and that is causing more species to go extinct. But, you know, if you look back in time, you know, it's a continuous process. Always species continue to become extinct and new species, you know, thrive and flourish, you know. So you have a continuous changing of, you know, species here on the planet, you know, always. And that's the one constant that's always happened, is there's a continuous change of species on the planet.
I have a question.
So there's a continuous extinction always happening, is my point.
So Ken, off the topic a little bit, have you ever been intimidated out in the field? And if so, what was the most intimidating thing that's ever happened to you, whether it be cryptid related or animal related, where you were scared?
That's a good question. Not to toot my own horn, but I don't get scared in the woods much. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time out there, and even where I grew up in South Texas, I would sneak out of my window at night and run around in the woods, and we had all kinds of venomous snakes and things. So that was never. But in my book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, I write about the one time that I think I was within 40 yards of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. It vocalized in a very aggressive way, and I was with some other researchers, but we only had one gun between the four of us, and all I had was a camera, and this thing sounded pretty angry. I recorded the sounds, so that was pretty intense, because, I mean, we felt this thing. We couldn't see it because it was in pretty heavy brush, but we could hear it, and it was very close to us. So that was kind of an unnerving experience. And as far as like non-cryptid animals, there have been a couple of times, like one time I was hiking in a part of Canada, and I was on a little island, and I was kind of by myself, and I didn't really have anything with me in terms of, I just hadn't prepared particular for that day, and didn't really have anything to defend myself. And I came onto the beach, and I saw some fresh bear tracks that were pretty big. And so bear had just moved through that area. And I kind of got pretty nervous, realizing that I didn't have any bear spray or anything with me. And so, yeah, I kind of turned around and moved out of there. But that was, you know, that was a little bit unnerving. I'm trying to remember if there's any others that, you know, they've got some pretty nasty snakes down in Central America. I've done some expeditions down in Belize, and they have this snake called the fer-de-lance. And I mean, it's much more venomous than any North American species. If you get bitten, you could die within minutes. And I heard that they'll even drop out of the trees on top of you, is what some people told me there. So, but I love the jungle, and I've, you know, done that stuff before. So those are the kind of ones.
Have you ever gotten ill from like an insect bite or a mosquito bite traveling out of country?
No, I haven't. Knock on wood. That hasn't happened to me. I've been well vaccinated every time I've gone to one of those third world countries. The whole barrage of yellow fever and whatever else you got to get. I do have friends, though. I'm friends with a researcher named Paul Nations, who has gone to Papua New Guinea a few times to search for the ropin, which is like a pterodactyl type thing. And he goes heavy into the jungle there. And he's gotten malaria and some other infections and things that have been pretty serious when he was down there. And then there are researchers that have gone to the Congo in Africa looking for the Mokele Mbembe, that mysterious dinosaur-like creature.
Yeah,
and,
I know who you're talking about.
And those guys have got, some of those guys have gotten sick and stuff. So, guys,
Now,
I'm sorry. I know this is live camera. I'm going to turn off my camera for 1 minute.
Yeah,
and you ask me a
absolutely.
question. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now, did you see what Dave Shealy just put out, that 300-pound python that those people got in Florida?
Is it the 100-foot one from the sky?
So
Is that the python?
yeah, it was like 300 pounds. They cut it open, 100 eggs in it.
Oh my gosh.
Now, could you imagine, not let alone venomous, man? That's a monster in itself. I mean, if it got you, you're done. But I do know
aren't venomous.
no. But
I think they're
they'll constrict you and swallow you.
But they're not venomous.
No, they have bacteria, but not venom. I know Dave has been itching to ask a question. So, Dave, are you froze?
He's taking notes or something.
I think he's froze. Go ahead, Ernie.
Oh, I've got some great questions for you. Let's start off cryptozoology. What creature do you think that you've written on or gone on expeditions on, do you think has the most realistic chance of actually being alive today and still existing? I mean, I'm a Bigfoot guy. This is a Bigfoot show. My second question, I guess, is Bigfoot experiences. But my first one is, for sure, what creature do you believe that is an unknown creature at this point that you really do believe exists?
That I've personally investigated, or that just in general?
Well, yeah. Either way, tell us both ways.
Well, that I've personally investigated, and I'm a Bigfoot. I'm 90% convinced that Bigfoot or Sasquatch exists. I've been on record about that. But when we were doing Missing in Alaska, and there's a famous lake monster, of course, in Alaska known as Illy, the Lake Iliamna monster, which isn't really similar, I don't think, to the Loch Ness monster so much. It sounds like a giant, or a group of giant fish that are at least 10 feet long.
A group?
Yeah, there have been sightings of a school of these things at a time. So it's not just one, it's several, apparently. And most of the sightings have been by like float planes and helicopters that are flying over the lake because it's pretty remote. But I think that one is very credible. I think that there most certainly could be. If you look at Lake Iliamna, it's one of the largest lakes in North America. It's very remote. Hardly any people live around there. Lots of other fish to eat. And so it seems to me probable that the Lake Iliamna monster, or Illy, is a reality of some kind, whatever it is, probably a giant fish species, maybe a group of isolated sturgeon or freshwater sharks or something like that.
Well, sturgeon seems like a wild guess, I guess. They've never, I don't think sturgeon have ever been known to like be in schools other than like being small. Do they?
If there's enough, they're endangered. They school, but there's not a number of them. But if there's a number of them in the area, yeah, they especially will school when it's mating season. All fish do. But Dave, I know he's been itching to ask you some stuff, Ken. Go ahead, David.
God. Hey, thank you. I got booted for a second, but I'm back on, so that's great.
Welcome back.
Great. I had a question for you. What do you think is the most interesting, or maybe your most favorite cryptid, and why?
Oh gosh, that's tough. My favorite, I get asked that actually from time to time, and And I tell people it's probably like choosing your favorite child, which I don't know. I've never had a child, so I don't know if you can choose a favorite child if you have with one. But one of my favorites is probably the Thunderbird, which I'm kind of known in the field of cryptozoology for investigating accounts of these massive birds with wingspans 15 to 20 feet across. Many references, of course, to them in Native American lore. Different names, Wakanyan, Chegwe, Bisile. Anyways, that's one of my favorites just because I've interviewed many people that have seen them, and a lot of people don't know about these Thunderbird accounts. And just think about how amazing it would be to see this majestic, gigantic bird 5 times larger than a bald eagle fly over your head, you know? Interesting. That's a good word. Let me think about that for a second.
Fly over your head sounds scary if it's that big.
Yeah.
What if it drops a bomb?
On your car or on your head? Interesting. They're also interesting to me. Oh, gosh. Well, one that's kind of offbeat and interesting to me is, the Mapinguari from the Amazon, which some people associate with Bigfoot, but there's that researcher, that scientist, David Oren. He's actually an ornithologist. He's been down there for years, and he's convinced that these creatures are surviving representatives of giant sloths, ground sloths, not tree sloths. So during the Pleistocene, the Ice Age, we had lots of these man-sized, 6 feet tall, even 12 feet tall sloths that were in the Americas, North and South America. And so that would be kind of interesting to find something like a man-sized ground sloth crawling around in the Amazon jungle. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting cryptids in the field, but that's a good example there.
Has there been any serious expeditions going on with the ground sloth in South America?
Well, David Oren has done a few, and in fact, I watched a really good documentary recently on YouTube, and I don't have the name, but it was about the giant ground sloth. And David Oren got another scientist, a skeptical scientist who's an expert in prehistoric sloths, to fly down to South America and to go out with him in the field. And of course, they had some local native guides and things, and they went out pretty deep in the jungle. And it was really an interesting documentary in terms of hearing David Oren present all of the evidence, but also the dynamic between him and this other traditional scientist who was convinced that these things could not exist, but he was open-minded enough to go along and just kind of listen to what David had to say and look at the evidence. And so there was an interesting, I think, in terms of having dialogue, which I think is important in this type of research, to have different perspectives and to not be afraid of having people with different opinions than you have, to kind of have discourse and say, well, let's look at evidence and kind of talk it out objectively and stuff. So I don't know, and finding Bigfoot, I think, I don't know if you consider a TV show an expedition necessarily, but of course they did an episode down there, Cliff and those guys. So but no, I don't think there have been any real well-funded expeditions. And that's really one of the sad parts about the field of cryptozoology, is there just isn't a lot of funding being put forward to there. We don't have any modern Tom Slicks. Tom Slick was a millionaire and he threw a lot of money at the Yeti and Bigfoot and some of these other cryptids, but we don't have anyone like that now that can fund these expeditions, which are going to be very expensive to do properly.
I've got another question. So Lauren Coleman threw out this picture on Facebook of this giant 15-foot salamander. What are you expecting to find in Northern California if you do run across a giant salamander? What size expectations are you expecting, I guess?
They said that's photoshopped. It was just for the appearance. Okay.
So the giant salamanders, to put this to rest finally beyond Lauren Coleman's little Facebook post there.
Well,
What-
even in
what-
his post,
a
he kind of
giant
mentions that it's
salamander,
a.
what size would you expect to find a giant salamander to be?
Well, certainly nothing 15 feet long, because that would be the largest amphibian ever. Now you're talking about going back to the Carboniferous period 300 million years ago to find a 15-foot long amphibian. But the
Again,
largest,
there are historical stories of this thing existing. What are they suggesting that a large one would be?
I'm thinking the average of the reports and the estimates is probably about 4 to 5 feet long, which is
That's
about the
huge.
size of the Japanese and Chinese giant salamanders. So yeah, pretty big. And
I
you
found
would
3 of them last year, and they were like all like under like probably 4 inches. You know, so
and the largest known
4 or 5
species,
footer would be huge.
yeah, the largest known species in that part of the world is only 12 inches. That's the Pacific giant salamander. It's about a foot long. So if we found anything
Wow.
longer than that, it would be exciting. Actually, it doesn't have to
That
be
would be exciting for
2
me.
feet.
I've been out there, and I've never run across a foot long salamander anywhere out there. But that would be cool. We run across them out here. I mean, like probably about 4 inches, about average. I think here. I
That's
ran across
probably
like, some blue spotted ones. They call them the blue spotted salamanders here. I found 3 of them, I think, last year here under logs and stuff or whatever. But they were blue spotted ones. I think we have yellow, other colored spotted ones here in Michigan. But they're like little small
I'd
things,
say
like 4 or
about
5 inches long. 3, 4, or 5 inches long.
Yeah, that sounds about
I have
right.
a
There's
question
probably a
for
lot
you,
of.
Ken.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's your opinion on Homo florentia?
Homo floresiensis?
Yeah, maybe that's it. The
Well,
Ibu
see,
Gobo.
The Hobbit?
absolute proof.
The
We
Ibu
have
Gobo. Yeah.
documented. We have fossils of that. That's real.
And that's
the
recent.
real
They're
deal.
the most recent. It's the Cannibal in the Jungle thing that Animal Planet did about it. The island of Florence in Indonesia. Timothy Darrow, the guy that died in prison, was accused of cannibalizing his expedition crew out there looking for some. What's your opinion on that? Does it interest you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a whole chapter in my book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, dedicated to something called Littlefoot. And Littlefoot, pardon the pun, is the most overlooked aspect of the Bigfoot field, because if you travel around the world and speak to different Aboriginal people, you'll hear about reports of little hairy men standing 3 to 5 feet tall, not a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, something much smaller, pygmy size. And I think the best example is probably the orang pendek of Sumatra, and then the Ibu Gogo from Flores. And certainly when you consider that we do have, as Ernie said, we have fossil evidence that dates back about 50,000 years that shows that this species, which was not human, it was human-like, coexisted with Homo sapiens 50,000 years ago in Indonesia, then it's certainly not a stretch to say that maybe, who knows, maybe something like that could still exist in some remote area of the world.
All right, Ernie. You said you had a whole list of questions for him.
Well, you know what? I'd like to go into something he said in his book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot.
Okay.
I am forever indebted to the following people. Without encouragement, sacrifice, and inspiration, this book will not have been possible. You list a whole list of names here. These are like some pretty important people. These are like the heroes in my Bigfoot world, most of them. Some of them are not. Some of them must be personal friends of yours also. Let me throw out the obvious: Bob Gimlett, Dr. Grover Krantz, Dr. John Bernigel, Bob Titmus, John Green, Renee DeHinden, Roger Patterson, Tom Slick, Jerry Crew, and Ivan T. Sanderson. Obviously, those are important people in the Bigfoot world. But you threw out a bunch of other people that seem to be possible friends of yours. Do you have any? My Annie, my family.
Oh,
Dr. Haskell Hart, you put him right at the very beginning. He just put out a new book, which is one of my favorite books in the whole entire Bigfoot world at this point, because it made a very important point in Bigfoot world. Okay, I love that guy.
he's a friend. Yeah, Haskell is a good friend of mine. He lives close by. So
Peter Byrne, Sam Sharon. You have Daniel Perez and Lauren Coleman, obviously, Cliff, John Kirk, Adam Davies, the awesome dude, Steven Strufert, Mark Massell, he did his great research on the Ape Canyon thing, and Jeff Meldrum.
all of those guys I interviewed for the book.
Lyle Blackburn, which obviously, I mean, you wear almost the same hat. You guys are from the same area, same locale. We're guys bros. Obviously are friends and good
bros,
friends. Yeah. I would think. Then you got Shelly Covington, Montana. How do you know her? She's another kind of Bigfoot interest. It's certainly one of the female people in the Bigfoot world. How does she? Where did you go on expedition? She's a new timer, I guess.
Yeah, well, she's in Texas.
She's not a John Green or anything like that. She's a newfound Bigfoot personality in the world. How do you run across her? Were the expeditions and stuff, mutual things like that?
The Texas Bigfoot community is a pretty tight-knit community. We have a Texas Bigfoot community that consists of me, Lyle, Craig Woolheater, Shelly Covington, Montana, Nick Redfern, and some other researchers that are all living in Texas. And so we're all kind of so I met Shelly, probably at the Texas Bigfoot conference a few years ago. And, we're just all friends. She's friends with Nick and Lyle, and I'm friends with her. And we all went to the Mothman Festival together a couple years ago. We all drove up there together. But she's an outstanding researcher. Like you said, she's newer to the field. She's been doing it longer than people think, but her name has just not been around. But she's definitely very dedicated. She spends every summer, she drives up to the Pacific Northwest by herself in her special research vehicle called Truck Norris, which she has all decked out in all kinds of high-tech equipment. And she camps out by herself in the Pacific Northwest every summer. And she's become an expert in animal tracking and different things. So she's definitely a very experienced researcher, and I trust her opinion. A lot of the other newer names that you mentioned on that list were people that I interviewed for my book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot. I conducted extensive interviews with Lauren Coleman, Cliff Barrickman, John Kirk, Steven Stufert, Ben Radford, all those people, Mark Marcel, gave me their time, and I wanted to basically, pick their brains because they're all really brilliant people, and kind of combine all of that information into the book. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of those names, and Haskell Hart, like you said, he's done a great job on the debunking the Bigfoot DNA myth. So, but all those people contributed to the book. So, and there were many people I wish I could have added to that list.
I'm honestly surprised you were able to say that on live video here tonight. Debunk the I guess that with Dr. Haskell Hart, debunking the Melba Ketchum project.
Yeah, it's one of those things that gives a black eye to the field, because to this day, if you go onto a lot of Bigfoot groups, social media groups, for example, and people will bring that up. Well, we have the DNA, and what are they going to explain that? And it's like, we don't have DNA. It hasn't been, and granted, this is all controversial stuff, but I think Haskell did an excellent job of explaining in his book why that all the assumptions about Bigfoot DNA and the alleged findings are not scientifically. I mean, he's a peer, and he tried to do a peer review, but hopefully we will find Bigfoot DNA at some point, but we can't say at this point that we have any.
But we don't have anything to compare it to. That's the whole problem. I mean, you can have all the DNA in the world and it come up unknown or contaminated because there's so much human in it. And we have nothing to compare it to.
Well, I think the whole
True.
point of the whole Sasquatch Genome Project was she claimed to have all the evidence right there and submitted to labs and everything else. And I personally can't conclusively say what happened with that project, but all I can say is one of two things happened. Either there was misinterpretation of the data, or there was some intentions of trying to fool the Bigfoot world and Bigfoot community in itself.
Well, we don't say
There are
that.
two possibilities out there, because the data does not provide conclusive evidence of the of the Sasquatch at all, and it really doesn't. And I have to side with the side of Dr. Haskelhart. I really do. And his analysis of the Sasquatch Genome Project. He did a really good in-depth. His book is great. I have his book, and I read his book, and it's
very technical. It's a very technical book, but
he does an excellent job of completely discrediting everything that I'm only left with two positions. Either she intentionally misled the world, or
to your opinion. That's it.
No,
That's
it was not
all.
opinion.
Yes.
I mean, are we dealing with science? Are we not dealing with science here? It comes down to that. It realistically, it does. The proof isn't there yet. I wish it was. I'm the first person in the world that would have jumped on board, and I even defended her wholeheartedly from like 2012 or 2013 all the way up to like 2015 or 2016. I was defending that, and I was telling all my friends that didn't believe in this stuff, look, here it is, here's the proof, and then I started getting into it, diving more into it, and more it just got bad, because it goes down to like she couldn't get she couldn't get a peer review of the paper, period, from anybody that would peer review it, period. There's no scientific anything journal that would do a peer review on the paper, period, because it was just so far out of whack. It was not even possible to even consider it relevant in the scientific world.
Ernie, we're running out of time, buddy.
She had to buy her own. She had to buy her own
publication,
scientific, the De Novo journal. She had to buy that journal to promote this paper. So I have a problem with that. I have to say, it needs to. Dr. Haskelhart, people need to read that book. It truly does shed a new light on the Sasquatch Genome Project. It's a really good book. People need to read it.
All right, Dave, what you got? Now you're going to let me borrow it, right, Ernie? You already read it. I don't have to buy it, do I? Dave.
I'll give it to you. I'll give you my book. You need to read it. Everybody needs to read it.
I'll read it. I'll pass it around. Come on, Dave.
Hey, Ken.
Yes.
Hey, Ken. We got a couple minutes left. Do you want to give a shout out to anyone or anything, or any project you're doing? Of course, your book.
Fix your mic, Dave.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I guess I just want to, mention again that I've got a new book coming out. It's gone to the printer. It'll still be a few weeks before it's out, but The Essential Guide to the Loch Ness Monster and Other Aquatic Cryptids. So it's mostly about the Loch Ness Monster, but it does talk about, Ogopogo and Champ and a lot of lake monsters around the world, the Flathead Lake Monster, the Lake Iliamna Monster, Tahoe Tessie, South Bay Bessie, which you guys have up in your neighborhood, and around the world. And, I don't want to give too much away with regard to the book, but it's going to be similar to The Essential Guide to Bigfoot in that I try to present the reader the most accurate, objective information regarding all aspects of the mystery. So I don't ever I do have some theories, and I have a theory that I advocate in the book to some degree, but I generally don't like to push my ideas onto the reader too much. I just like to present, different opinions and evidence and let people use their critical thinking skills to try to form their own theories and opinions, because everyone's entitled to do that. So
people like me certainly appreciate the work you do. Thank you for your critical thinking skills with your presentation of the books you put out, and even the TV shows you've been involved with. You don't lead people on. You do a really good job of that. And I appreciate that so much with people like you. You are the people. You are my heroes in the Bigfoot world and in the cryptozoology world. Really, honestly, you do a great job.
Thank you, Ernie. That means a lot. I really appreciate that, brother. Thank you.
Continue doing what you're doing, and continue on the track that you're moving on, and continue to try to push people in that direction that you're moving on, and to use critical thinking skills. And just the Bigfoot world is completely got out of control with the blob squatches and the blown up blurry tree pictures.
I agree and disagree, Ernie. Yes, it has. There's still those people out there, but I believe the Bigfoot world has gotten stronger through people like us that take it serious. And there's always going to be those people out there that are taking pictures in their backyard and zooming them to try to find something and post them. They're not going to go away. But I think I see the community growing together, being more united over the last few years than it has the 5 years prior.
Well said.
Well, I'm kind of a hardcore skeptic. Our little group here in Michigan, I kind of
guys?
Try to bring people in that.
What do you see, Dave? Dave, you there? He don't see nothing. He's froze.
I see people like Ken bringing a lot of credibility and academic credibility to the cryptozoological field.
Agreed.
Kind of you to say. Thank you, David.
Ken, you've never met Robert Kreider, huh?
No, I think I've met him in person. I think we talked a couple of times. It's been a while, but I seem to remember having a phone call or a exchange with him a few years ago, but I've never met him in person.
Really cool guy, man. So
cool. I'm looking forward to seeing him and seeing you guys at the event. I'm excited about it.
How about John Green? Have you ever met John Green? Did you ever get a chance to meet him? And
I'm afraid not. No, I never had a chance to meet.
He's one of my big time heroes in the Bigfoot world.
Yeah, everyone's. Shortly before he passed, and he was ill for a long time, my buddy Craig Woolheater from Texas got to go up and visit with him. And I think at one time I might have had a narrow window to tag along if I could have gotten up to Canada, but I unfortunately didn't make it. I met John Bindernagel, and he was a really great guy. And gosh, we're losing so many of the great ones. But no, I never met John or Renee or Grover. And of course, I correspond with Peter Byrne, who wrote the foreword to my book, and he's still kicking it at 94 years old. So,
well, tell me about this connection.
Ken, just because they're gone, they're passing the torch. Okay, there's going to be a day down the road. There's going to be people that are in our community that are younger right now that are going to be the legends, and you're going to be one of them.
No. Kind of to say. You're right. There will be other people that lift up. Yes.
So I happened to catch some comments recently with Craig about Sally and the Fort Worth monster.
Sally Ann Clark. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sally Ann Clark. And his connection there with, he threw out a picture with John Green and Sally, and then you caught that little thread there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what's Craig's connection there? Is he the one that brought out the books, the brand new books that came out of her attic?
Well, Craig Woolheater grew up in the area around Lake Worth, and so he was inspired by her at a young age by the story of the Lake Worth monster. And then he later had his own Bigfoot sighting in Louisiana, and then started the Texas Bigfoot research group and convention. But he met Sally Ann Clark before she passed away and was able to obtain a lot of her pictures and a lot of her books that had never been sold. She had a stockpile of these books she had written about the Lake Worth monster. And so
I
he
ended
got
up with
to
one
meet.
of those books from
Sorry?
him like years ago. I ended up with one of those
Yeah.
brand new books.
You're
I think
lucky
I
you got
posted
one
one.
back then, because now they're getting more and more scarce, because the books were published in like the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah,
They just
59, I think.
sat in her attic for years. So it's a classic.
I think
know,
it's 1969 publishing, I think.
Yeah, probably right.
the chat, the most talk right now, and it is about Alaska and all the people that are going missing. You got an opinion on that, Ken, or are you aware of it?
Well, I hosted a TV show about it, so I know a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Not to be.
I know we're at an hour, man, but give us a couple more minutes, buddy.
Tell us about the show. What's the good experiences, the cool stuff that happened on that show? Let the world know about that, like the back scenes of missing in Alaska. That'd be a cool story. Come on, tell us a little bit.
Well, the show Missing in Alaska was aired on History Channel in 2015, and it's still airing in England and other parts of the world, and it's on YouTube, of course. But the premise of the show is that there's an area in Alaska called the Alaska Triangle, and there have been other newer shows that talk about the Alaska Triangle, and it's this area where you have a lot of unexplained phenomenon, Bigfoot sightings, other cryptids, UFOs, and all these people. But ultimately, a lot of people vanish in this particular area. And I think there was something like 50,000 unresolved missing persons cases in Alaska dating back over the past few decades. So something like 2% of the population of the state of Alaska goes missing every year. Some of those people do turn up again, but coming at it from a pragmatic angle, if you go out into the wilderness in Alaska, you would understand why a lot of people would go missing there, because there are a lot of dangers. Bears, falling into a crevice, hypothermia, and so on and so forth. So probably a lot of those people do die of natural causes and are just never found because it's such a vast area.
Well, what do you say? 2% of the population goes missing?
Something like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's a crazy number.
But some of those people do get found. 2% are reported missing, but maybe only, I don't know how many are actually still missing. Okay. You say 50,000 out of 600,000. That's like 1% maybe that's on the records of open cases, missing persons cases. Maybe just 1% or less. Still a crazy number. Still a lot of people.
Where do you think they go, Ken? Ken, where do you think they go? I mean, some's natural. Some people just sink in something and they decompose and they're never found again for 100 years.
Frozen in the permafrost.
Yeah.
Well, one of my co-investigators on the show was a police detective named Jax, and Jax Atwell. And Jax was telling me constantly while we were up there that a lot of people, in his experience as a private investigator, want to go missing. And so he thinks a lot of those people just disappeared off the grid because they just didn't want to be in society anymore, and they just either wandered off in the wilderness or
had
faked their death or something. So that kind of makes sense. I'm not an advocate of like the crazy 411 conspiracies that people are being abducted by Sasquatches or anything like that. So
but it is possible that some of it is Sasquatch. I mean,
it's possible.
Thank you, Ken.
It's possible, sure, but I'm not an advocate of that. I can't prove it either way, but maybe it is true in some cases. But there are reports, not very many, of Bigfoot abducting people. I mean, you've got the Albert Ostman story from British Columbia in 1924, and a lot of Native American stories of young maidens being abducted by hairy savages. But
certainly children put in baskets in the Native American stories.
Yeah. Behind the scenes stories, there's really too many to say, but I can say that I butted heads with the producers a lot because when they first signed me to do the show, they told me they wanted it to be like super scientific and critically thinking and stuff. But when I got up there, when I was under contract and we started filming, they kept trying to get a little bit more like melodramatic with some of the information. Like, well, we know that, but can we just, hype this up a little bit? And I was kind of stubborn and I didn't like, I would never fake evidence. So none of that happened. But, I thought it was kind of silly sometimes when they were trying to like, create a little bit of extra drama. But I understand it's a TV show and they,
it's scripted. There has to be a script.
They have to get people to watch. Well, there has to be kind of excitement for the, it would be very boring for people watching a show if you went out walking around for hours and didn't find anything or didn't have any opinions about anything. So, but it wasn't, it was mildly scripted at times, but I fought them tooth and nail on a lot of that stuff and had some pretty heated exchanges with some of the producers at times. So that was kind of interesting. But
how much content control do they have? What if you actually really got something good? Would the network let it be on there? Because there's people that say, there's no way that Finding Bigfoot went that long without getting good evidence, and they don't put it on there. Their best evidence was a horse, and they left you in suspense. A horse on a thermal, and then the next step, and they almost broke up over that.
Well, I don't think it's any big secret when I say that, there's a different chain of command. I'm the talent, and you have the producers, but the people that are ultimately calling the shot are at the network. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward, which is they're spending millions of dollars to produce the show. It's all out of their pocket. So if they say they don't like something or they do like something, the production company basically is working for them, and they'll typically go along with that. So that's, I was never worked with the Finding Bigfoot people, but of course I'm good friends with Cliff Barrickman, and I know that they had a lot of solidarity in their crew. So, at the first season, they were kind of pissed off about some things, but they stuck together, the whole cast. And by doing that, they were able to force their hand a little bit with the producers of the network and say, hey, we'll all just walk if you don't. So, but, there's only, you guys know, you go out into the field. I mean, you don't find evidence every time you go out there. So, they have to, they have to figure out ways to keep the show entertaining. If they're not finding evidence, they're still going to have an interesting nighttime investigation, or the town hall meetings are fun. You get to hear about other people's sightings and stuff like that. So it's still an entertaining show, but anyways.
Well, I have to hand it to you with your show. You did a good job of staying critical with the evidence and being realistic and being real about it, and not trying to push some narrative or some crazy theory or something more entertaining. I have to hand it to you for not doing that. You did a good job on the Missing Alaska show. I have to admit that. I can give you credit for that. I'm sure you were being pushed, and I'm sure you had to say things that you probably didn't want to say, or like whatever.
There were compromises for sure.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
And in keeping it real as you could. I'm sure you were under pressure.
All right, so
maintaining your professional credibility.
Yep. Okay, so Ken did us this favor. I'd like to thank Ken Gergard for being on the show. I would also like to thank him for accepting the invite to speak at our conference.
Thank you.
It's been great, Ken. I know you don't like to do more than an hour. We're at an hour and 10 minutes. I'm not trying to run you off. If you have something to say it. We'll keep you as long as you want, but I realize you have a life too, and you're a busy guy, and people contact you. And
I'll come back on your show again someday. This isn't the only time I'll make an appearance, so we can pick it up then.
Sounds good, buddy. Sounds good.
Hey, thanks for coming on, Ken.
Thank you, guys. Great questions. I had a lot of fun conversation.
Can you give Dave?
Thanks, Ken.
Can you give Dave one last question? Because he didn't get to ask many. He's been kicked out if he's here. You got a question, Dave?
No, that's okay. I'm good, man.
All right, man. You have a good one. Thanks.
I am thrilled about our upcoming event on July 17th, and I look forward to it. And I look forward to speaking with Ken and Ken being there and being a part of the whole thing.
And I'm
Maybe
excited.
he
I'm
stays. Maybe
excited
he
too.
stays. Maybe he follows us on our expedition.
Peace, Ken. Keep
Peace,
being
guys.
cool, man.
All
Love
right,
you,
I think we
Okay,
have to
guys.
close out, everybody, because I don't think Blake's here to kick us out and shut it off. So I think we have to close out.
Thank you, guys. Everyone out there, stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care. Great having you on, Ken. Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you
Take care, Ken.
guys. Thank you.